Hello, everyone. Last class.
Congratulations, everyone.
I'm excited.
I'm excited for everyone. They learned a lot. I got an email this morning.
Thank you.
Hello, hello.
I love the class and I appreciate it a lot. And I've been using it here at work. So.
Good,
Oh,
good.
perfect, good.
Good. There's a message I came in today from one of the Spanish speaking students, and they said, this class is a whole lot better than I thought it would be.
That's kind of like, actually, that is like the best compliment.
I'm like, well, no, I'm like, but you think that's a compliment, but it's not. But thank you.
Yeah, it's like a backwards, but also it's like, I'm stoked that they like were
yeah.
I had really low expectations and then you surpassed them. I'd rather
My-
be that than the other way around, where you're like, I thought it was going to be like amazing, and like this was not what I thought.
It wasn't what I thought it would be.
Yeah. So sorry for any of you guys that feel that way.
Yeah.
Don't want to hear it.
We only want to hear good things.
Yeah. No, put it in the survey. Just.
So you will be taking the survey today, right?
Are they?
They're supposed to be on the last class.
Okay. I don't have the survey, but
I can send it to you, or let me send it to Michael, and hopefully he can put it up because they're supposed to take like the 10 minutes to make sure it gets completed.
Oh, okay. We can do that. You want to do it at the end?
Yeah.
Do it in the beginning.
We should probably wait till the end so that they get a chance to look at all of this.
Okay.
So Michael, I'll be DMing it to you. For anyone that's coming to the pruning class tomorrow, please remember to park on the street, and also please remember to meet in front of the HQ building. I will do my best to be out there before the 8:30 start time. We also have a 9 o'clock design class going on, and I'll be in the classroom helping her set up. So 2 places at once. I'll see what I can do. I'll work my magic.
Yes.
So, okay. Those are all the announcements I have. Thank you for everyone that submitted their name. All the certificates are printed. Everyone that shows up for the pruning class tomorrow will get their certificate and their car decals, and everybody else will mail them ASAP.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so one last lecture. What was I gonna say real quick? Oh, I'm gonna like cut the homework review a little bit shorter just so we have enough time for the survey, because I didn't know about it and I didn't really plan it in, so I'll just cut the homework review a bit shorter. But yeah, you guys, this class is kind of like, it's pretty easy. It's mostly like gonna be just review a bit and like kind of the odds and ends and talking about like kind of costs and stuff like that, but shouldn't be, you know, too much brain power, I hope. But like, I guess just quickly, we can talk a little bit about the homework. So a lot of you guys sent it in, and there were the, well, I gave you 2 options. So this one just says the first option, which was like grouping the plants into, you know, similar pruning techniques. But several of you guys did the other option, which was to just send me a photo or like assess a native plant that you know, have in your vicinity or with a client, and kind of like give me your breakdown about what pruning methods you were going to do with it. Does anyone want to share on this one? I mean, I feel like this one's pretty self-explanatory, but any interesting things? Oh yeah, is there? I'm going to try and remember what you guys said in your emails, because I feel like some people had some interesting stuff that they added, unless you guys want to shout it out. Help me out here, guys. Let's see. Oh, I can't come up. I can't see anything. Yeah, I had a few of you guys do some, like you just took a few plants and from the, what's it called? From the flashcards, and then just kind of chose those and decide, you know, kind of explained what you would do with them. Trying to think. Oh yeah, I have one here from, yeah, I liked when you guys showed, who was it I just emailed recently and I said, thanks for your synopsis and your summary. I'm not remembering. I remember my response, but essentially you gave like a really nice summary of the situation, like kind of the client, and oh, it was the one with the school, and the school wanted to have a Salvia spathaceae that was like essentially, you know, something native plants that they can use as like kind of student engagement tool, but also it needs to be like still pretty nice looking. They don't want it to have that like crispy, dry looking look to it. Is that person here? All right. I can't remember who that was. Well, anyway, what I liked about it was the fact that it kind of spelled out the clients and their needs, you know, so it's like it's students, there's children, but also they want it to still look pretty good. And so they explained why they would be deadheading the Salvia spathaceae as opposed to like maybe leaving them for the seed to fall off and then be like part of the, you know, like bird food or habitat. So it's kind of like I liked that they tried to explain it. But that being said, since everyone's feeling so quiet and I kind of want to make sure there's time at the end, I'll just move ahead. So lesson 8, this actually used to be 2 classes and then we kind of jammed them into one. So that's why there's so many points here for kind of objectives. But essentially, it's really just the garden assessment. So we're going to talk about doing a site assessment at a new garden, and then then essentially kind of like maybe cost analysis, how to like, you know, figure out how long it'll take you to do whatever plan of attack you have for a garden, and then just like a couple of odds and ends that just didn't fit anywhere else really. So starting with the garden assessment. So basically it's like when you get to a new garden that you haven't, you know, tended before, you need to kind of come down to, basically have to figure out like, okay, what are their needs? Like, what's the client want? You know, how can I work with this person to, you know, achieve the garden they want, along with assessing like how much time and how much should I charge for this? Like, those are kind of the main things you're figuring out, right? You know, assessing the garden for figuring out and estimating your costs and time. So I think, you know, I know some of you guys are, well, I'm sure everybody has some professional experience about how to price things. But essentially, as we talked about, I think in the first lecture almost, was essentially you might be spending less time, sorry, not less time, less frequent visits in a native garden than like a more traditional kind of turf yard type thing. But you might spend more hours there. So that would be like the main difference. But again, it's like, it's going to be customized to each garden and how it is. So anyway, a solid detailed site assessment, I think, is the first step to getting a good idea of the client's needs and, you know, the needs of the actual garden so that you can make those cost estimates. So we have on page 135 of your student handbook, a template for a garden, like a basic site assessment or garden assessment. It says here, client landscape evaluation form. This one, I think, super generic, not the end all be all by any means, but just kind of a place for you to have all the different features and characteristics that you should be at least reviewing in a garden. So anyway, it's on page 135. And if you want to open up to that page or at least have it handy, we're going to kind of go through it and talk about some of the, like, you know, the different points on it. So you can see here, you know, it has client name and all that stuff, and age of the garden, and then it has all the different kind of features and characteristics of the garden. Like, this is just plants, then we have soil, and the way this is divvied up is prioritizing. So just kind of what are priorities, which personally I don't really work that way, but I think it's just about making it work the best for you, because you just need to assess this situation. So in this case, it's based off of like a 1 to 5 of priorities, but I could also see it just being kind of like yes or no, like yes, things exist, or kind of checking where, checking things off that do or don't exist, and maybe making your notes. It just depends on how you work, obviously. But that being said, this is the 3-page form. But I just wanted to kind of say, again, this is a basic one, but there's some things that are missing from it that I think are really important. You could always add kind of extra considerations or, you know, a different form. But one thing that's missing that I think's really important is kind of an area for like the client's that's an area that's about the client specifically and their desires and needs for the garden. This is mostly about just like assessing the garden, but of course you're dealing with like a person and what they want in their garden. So I think there's got, you know, it says here overall appearance, which I would just, you know, that's, I guess, your subjective opinion, but I think in this area, I would maybe make this kind of the client's description of their garden, or, you know, what the kind of a lot of the words they use. So for example, like you could say like curb appeal, you know, is it from the street? How does it look? How do they think it looks? Do you know what I mean? Are they like, this is too messy. I wish this had more life to it. You know, all the words they're using, I think, are sometimes just important to write down because it kind of helps you understand like their values for their future or their current garden. So yeah, like what's the curb appeal of this garden? And, you know, does it represent native gardens well? You know what I mean? Because again, we kind of do want to combat that assumption and misconception that some people have about native gardens being like weedy or like not beautiful. And so we want to make sure we're not adding to that, you know. So I think that is something, you know, finding out how they feel, the client feels about their garden. You know, how do they feel about sustainability? Is sustainability important to them? Are they like, I want to be water conserve, you know, I want to be conserving water. I don't want to be using chemicals, that sort of thing. Or is it like, I really just want it to have all year round color and I need it to look really nice and manicured because that's necessary for the HOA. You know, really getting to what is it that is important for them. And then like within that too would be, how do they use their garden? So do they use it for relaxation? Do they want it to be a quiet place? Or is it a place for entertaining people? Is it a like play zone? You know, is there a lot of romping around and playing there? Definitely finding that out, I think, is really important. And like, I can't stress it enough. And then of course I put there over here on the left that take photos at that first site visit. Take photos. You will forget what it looks like, forget where things are. And it's always nice to have a you know, like a before and after photo. So it's always nice to have a before you started taking care of it for your own case scenario, but also for like, you know, if you want to submit any kind of report to the client themselves, you know, about how it's looked since you've been taking care of it. So yeah, so it's important to get what the client needs, but also, of course, we want to know we want to assess just the garden itself. But I just wanted to emphasize there is no place on this evaluation form for kind of the client's specific needs. And I think that should be in there. So, you know, edit it accordingly. But once you have your client's needs, you can actually get into the, you know, your observations of the garden. And that's what the rest of the evaluation form is basically about. Sorry. So you can see here, I'm just going to go through each of these. You can see plants is this first part. And you have, it just says like plant list, plant health, all the, you know, it has like plant maintenance. I think I have a slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm actually, yeah, age of the garden. Sorry about that. So the top is, wow, my mouse is very sensitive today. Okay, so we know that the age of the garden is important because with native plants, the, you know, years 1 through 3 are considered kind of the establishment years, and that really affects the way we water. You know, as we talked about at length, that usually you are going to water, you know, more frequently when it's younger, and this whole period you need to be establishing the plant in those first 3 years ish, and you are kind of like tapering off the water. So of course, knowing the age of the garden is really important for that. And also because we divvied up maintenance tasks. You know, the maintenance tasks can be kind of different as the garden gets older, especially though in watering. But so of course you want to know the age. Obviously you can just ask, you know, the client, or you could figure that out based off of just the plant's development. Is it, you know, is it a mix of you know, established plants and new plants? Because we've also talked about that being an important distinction, because you might be having to hand water those newer plants, whereas the established plants might be able to stay on the irrigation system or something like that. So any trees that are established, you know, are they established? Definitely you want to have all that information and kind of note when things were installed, if you have it, or you can, you know, if you can ask.
Excuse me, Claire, or
yeah,
it's David here. I was just maybe want to step back a little bit.
Sure.
Is it the understanding that this is a native garden already, or?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
I guess, it also can be, so I guess, yeah, I'm using the example of like a maintenance job. So someone has a native garden, but potentially if you were doing an install, that would be a different, it would be kind of a different approach, but you would still do a garden assessment. You know what I mean? But maybe there's parts that wouldn't be, what's the word? Like relevant, so certain things, but I would still want to do a site assessment if it was like all dead turf and they wanted to install native plants. But of course you wouldn't really, maybe the type of plants that are existent wouldn't be as important, but they still might if you're maybe in charge of the plant selection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I guess I just, I think then that kind of blend of it, if they had exotics or, non-natives in the garden, I guess that's a question if the client would like to have both, I guess, or if
Yeah,
they're open to that, or how
Absolutely.
aggressive do they want to attack, the transformation of the garden, I guess. And so
yeah,
those would kind of be questions I'd want to ask, but
for sure. And I think that's kind of part of, like I said, there's so many things that we're not, I can't
Yeah.
include in here, but that obviously, like you mentioned, but I think that to me is kind of the whole part of like talking with the client about what they see for their garden. So I'm kind of operating as if they want all natives, but you're absolutely correct. A lot of people are like, oh, I love this big bougainvillea. It's been in this yard forever and I like the way it looks. And so of course you would take that into account. So in that case, I would kind of almost like, I think here on the plants list, did I have something written about that? Yeah, like major trees or features, like if there's certain things that they are sentimentally attached to in terms of plants, or they just are like, I have this, my vegetable garden over here and I want natives over here, or yeah, that's absolutely, this is part of the intake information for sure. So plants don't have to be only native plants. Definitely it can be, whatever. And we know everybody, plant yards have everything and all of the above.
I'll just add one more thing. I'm sorry for
Mhm.
keeping interrupting.
No, don't worry about it.
I think the other thing is like you should get a Google Earth or ask the client if they have a plan of their site, because then that's a way to either, to take notes or because,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
that'd be
absolutely.
something that's always kind of something you always want to ask when you do.
Yeah.
These things.
It's in a later slide, but I agree. I personally don't use a site evaluation like this. Personally, I always like to have like the Google Earth image or a map, and then I do the evaluation on that. But I think it's to each his own, but I do find the map to be really helpful. In fact, actually, that's that's exactly what I was going to say about this slide, about the plant list, which is like, you can get a plant list from the owners if they have it, or if they have the plan, like David mentioned. I really do like having the map with me, because you can actually ID all the plants on the map directly. If you know what they are, and if not, just take a picture and put a question mark, I suppose. So yeah, I really like to have that, because there's the assessment form, I think, is important for basically things you shouldn't forget to do, you know what I mean, or shouldn't forget to assess. But I would always do that, yeah, on a physical map or architect's plan, or what if they have a landscape plan, or just create one. But yeah, asking about any major features, or if there's like a big old fountain that they like, or you have to ask about everything in the yard essentially. And whether, if it's a really large feature, if they want it there or not. Trees, yeah, as David pointed out, non-native trees, mixing them with it. Most people don't want to like rip out a giant tree, so you just work with it. So in addition to, or alongside with all the plant stuff, not only looking for like what plants are there, but also looking for, obviously plant health. So how healthy are they? Are they overall good? Are you seeing stressed plants, diseased plants, dying plants? Are you seeing a lot of pests? Are you seeing pest infestation? Are you seeing a lot of invasive plants, or even invasive weeds? So these are all things just taking note of, and again, writing it on either your map or making note of, like, yeah, a big weed pressure. And then on your evaluation form, they have on the urban wildland interface. So is firescaping a priority? Because if it is on the interface, then maybe that is, that's more of a priority than, maybe creating wildlife or sorry, creating habitat for wildlife. So just, yeah, asking all the kind of different questions. And then of course, asking what's the current maintenance, or at least observing, what is the current maintenance? Are things overplanted? Are they being pruned for that or not? Are they being pruned at all? Deadheading, just any of the maintenance things we basically talked about would fall, you'd note these things on your kind of plant portion of the evaluation form. Then there's like these 3 kind of categories that the other page says garden features. You can't see it, but it's the title for this, which is garden features, which is shade, water features, and outdoor rooms. Again, so this says shade. This is exactly where I would stay with the map kind of, and note where the shade is on the map. Obviously put the south and north facing side, so where there will be winter shade, because the sun, is lower in the sky. So anything on the north facing side will get some shade typically. Of course, any big structures, that's going to shade things. So definitely noting any of that. Sometimes you can do even a percentage of shade, like, is the backyard just like 85% shade because it's surrounded by trees on all sides or something? Give a percentage, like it's full exposure, letting, so that you kind of remember and know the different shade and light features of the garden. Water features, yeah, fountain, bird. This one just has all these things. Of course, these are important to note. Obviously bird baths and fountains and stuff can be kind of like, they can be water sources for wildlife and, birds and things like that. So it can be kind of they're called, what is that called? Gardens can qualify for like a natural habitat space or whatever they're called, natural wildlife space. So one of the things you need for that though is some kind of water feature. So anyway, having that, I think importantly is the infiltration basin part, or rain garden or dry riverbed, any of those things that kind of qualify for the turf replacement rebate program, noting that on your assessment, because you might want to note any definitely with rain garden basins and rain gardens and infiltration basins, you have to maintain the inlets and the outlets. So where the water flows in and flows out, you have to kind of regularly maintain at least once a year before the rainy season. And maybe if they're connected to the gutters or the roof gutters, then you would kind of include that in there, any kind of water feature like that. And then outdoor rooms is just similarly, I think this kind of falls under the category of like, how do they use their space? But if there's different surfaces, like is there a big patio, is there a deck that they use, and how close are the plants to these kind of surfaces that maybe are used for entertaining, and are they suitable? So like maybe if they have a fire pit area, you don't want it to be surrounded by a bunch of flammable chamise, or if it's like a play romping area, maybe you don't want it to be surrounded by a lot of kind of brittle mimulus, like monkey flowers that kind of break off really easily. So noting those things. The next one is soil and mulch, which of course is important. We had a whole class on this. Generally speaking, you're kind of looking for drainage issues. You could do your what's it called, your drainage test at that time if you wanted, just to get an idea of like, is this a slow, medium, fast draining soil? Look for signs of clay, compaction, hydrophobic soils, or any kind of drainage stuff, since those can be problematic, or especially if you don't pick the right plant for the space. And also you can pick appropriate plants. Oh my goodness, I'm really sorry guys, I don't know what's going on. You can pick appropriate plant palettes for these kind of issues, that will help kind of alleviate some of these issues. Of course, look for erosion. That's you can plant to that, maybe plant some deeper rooted species along the waterways so that they actually hold the soil in place. If you're seeing, soil that's getting on the sidewalk or the driveway, that maybe is an indication that there's runoff and potentially erosion. Once runoff leads to erosion, it's just losing soil. Any areas that stay wet too long or dry too long, again, you can choose the appropriate plant palette for those areas. So noting those those areas is important, because you could just be like, oh, I'll just make this a desert area, or this one a more riparian area. And I always, again, if I have the map available, I would definitely note the high and low points on my map. I always try to kind of just have a general arrow of how does water flow on the property or the landscape. Of course, any slopes or like drainage, or, you know, where the gutters come out, I think is important to note, because essentially knowing how the water flows can mean either, you know, not directing it in that area or capturing it, you know, so like taking advantage of the fact that that's where water flows and having it absorb into the soil in that spot. Or if it's a really low wet area that stays wet, of course, you can always make it kind of riparian zone. So, and then lastly, of course, you know, the mulch, you know, do they have it? What kind do they have? Is it appropriate for the plants that they have planted, and how deep is it? You know, is it too deep? Is it like 12 feet, or is it, you know, just way too, it's just a little bit on the top, you know, making sure we do that 2 to 3 inches. And the next section in your form is irrigation. So irrigation, yeah, I would say definitely ask about their current water use. And of course, like check the irrigation system if they have one, and just see if it works. You know, does it work? Is it appropriate for the either the current garden they have or the one they want in the future? You know, if they are transitioning to a native garden, is this an appropriate irrigation system? Is it like super out of date? You know, maybe it's not, maybe it doesn't, you can't program it for like longer than 7-day intervals. So maybe it's time to upgrade it. Maybe they can qualify for one of the rebates for like a, you know, weather-based irrigation controller or something. So, so yeah, definitely review the irrigation system, you know, check each hydrozone in the irrigation system, like just definitely check that out, see if it's working. I feel like most of the time when I ask people about the irrigation system, especially when they haven't been watering their lawn, because now they're interested in natives or something for instead of their dead lawn, most of the time the answer is like, oh, I've never used it, I don't even know if it works. So I think finding that out is important. And then I already kind of said this, understanding how the water flows on your client's property. So I, again, always put a high and low point, and just, you know, I like literally draw little blue arrows that are like, this is how the water moves on this space. And especially too, if there's like, when it does rain, is there like a flooding spot? You know, you can fix that issue for people by redirecting it, you know. And this point is, yeah, what I was just saying, looking for that, or was saying in the last slide, which is erosion and runoff. And yeah, I think that's it then for irrigation and whatnot. Oh, there is this part which has the controller type and brand. I mean, if that makes sense, yes. But definitely noting that I think the more important part is, yeah, like locating the actual, I mean, it's not locating, I'm sorry. Actually trying to use the irrigation system. And yeah, if they have a box you can tap into and see if it actually works, and that's fine too. Okay. Here you can see there's also all the different rebates that are offered, except for the new one that she added, which was the, what is that? Not the soil moisture sensor, the flow one. That's not on here. But either way, you know, you could just have those on your evaluation form so that you know, are familiar with them, and you can kind of mention them at the, you know, first meeting. And then at the end, you definitely want to give it some kind of like garden grade, you know, like you want to categorize the garden for yourself, because you might not remember after the fact, but kind of just, it helps you to kind of categorize it as like, how much work does this garden need, or how much work is this going to be, you know? So for a maintenance job, that's I think this is really important. And then if you're doing like an install, of course, it's just like, you know, you're just figuring out like just the costs of how much it will be to like do the labor to install the garden. But this, I think, is really important for like a maintenance type job, because it's going to help you determine how much to charge for, like, you know, how many hours you're going to need to keep this type of garden up to snuff, essentially. So it's just going to help you give a more accurate estimate, of course. So this form just has healthy, needs work, and needs major improvement. So basically like easy, medium, and hard, you know what I mean, in terms of the amount of work. So that will indicate your kind of cost almost. So if it's like a healthy garden, you know, it's a easier, like less work to be done, no major issues. The natives are mostly grown out to like at least 75% of the whole garden. The irrigation system is like appropriate and waters things appropriately and effectively. And there's not really any major pests or weed issue. So that's like a healthy garden. And really you're just doing some kind of regular upkeep and maintenance. So that would be, you know, I think you're approaching a much easier job there. And needs work would be just like one major focus area. So that, you know, needs work, which is like either the irrigation system or they just have a real high weed pressure happening. Like, you know, the Bermuda grass is coming in, they're not on top of it. Or, you know, they have some plants with, you know, some kind of pest issue or something. And then lastly, the kind of the hardest or needs major improvement would be that a garden that has more than one major issue. So maybe they have a faulty irrigation system that's created this like weed situation, or you know, maybe overwatering that's led to a bunch of plant death because of root rot, or, you know, something like that. Or just like the, you know, budget is limited. So there's a lot of work to be done, but they just don't have the funds to do it. Or they need it done quickly. Like there's something coming up that they need it done quickly. So it's like that triangle, that project management triangle, that's like either done quickly, done high quality, or it's low cost, and you really can only pick two. So that's the kind of situation on that third one. But yeah, so I just want to say, like, you know, you should have some kind of site assessment form. You don't have to be married to this one by any means, but just having something where you make sure to kind of ask all the important pertinent questions, and things like the things that David mentioned too, you know, like making sure you ask everything that's important to know from the get-go, and then assigning some kind of like, this is going to be a lot of work, or this is not going to be so much work to it when you're at that point, so that you kind of remember, you know, you don't forget about like, was this an easy looking yard or not? We have a little bit of an interactive exercise here. So kind of just like we were doing with, or not, we weren't doing it, but the giving it a grade. So essentially using that checklist and everything else we've kind of talked about for the last 7 classes, we're going to look at a couple different examples of gardens. I mean, of course, they're just pictures, but maybe noting some differences, or even giving them a grade, you know, like how would you grade it? And how might you approach these different gardens? What are some things that you're noting that are coming up? You know, if you were to give a site assessment for these gardens, what are the things that are popping up? And just feel free to, you know, shout stuff out or put it in the chat. Many of these are kind of side-by-side photos of before and afters. Like you can see the one on the left is a newly installed one, and then the one on the right is, you know, a little more than 2 years old. So looking at these two sites, what pops out to people, you know, as if you were, you know, called to this site on the left they want to have someone maintaining their garden, what are you seeing, you know, on the first time visualizing it?
I mean, this is David again, but I mean, it probably works, you know, it just seems like it could use some more taller stuff that'll get taller. It all looks like it's all ground covers or shrubs, and maybe that's what they wanted, but it looks like the spacing is fine. And 2 years later, it looks like it came out good too. So
yeah,
it may be,
but if you were to just see it from the beginning, if you didn't know this, the 2 years later, you would say a lot of ground covers, and did you say it's like needs some taller things?
Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any tree or anything that would give some verticality. It's just, and maybe that's what they wanted. They wanted it to be really old.
Got it.
But
I see what you're saying. Yeah, so maybe you would be asking about that. Like, do you like this kind of flatter look? I see in the chat, it says, Brittany says, looks pretty easy to maintain, lots of established plants. I don't know about established since they're newly installed, but I think you might have meant like they've taken, because they look like they aren't in the ground, like, you know, it's newly installed, but they seem to be like, you know, a couple weeks in. And then Margaret says it's young and underpopulated. So yeah, I would definitely say it's young. We know it is because I have the label there. But when you see something like this with like fresh ass mulch and like a bunch of little guys, I wouldn't suspect that it's like, I would suspect that they're young. And so they might actually fill out the space pretty well. As you can see in the second photo, they do fill out the space kind of nicely. So yeah, I would suspect, okay, this is a very young garden. And you know, is it spaced correctly? I see Luis says see ground cover on the right. Oh, this guy here, you're talking about that one, Luis? And then Milton says that pathway. Are you saying it like that pathway is nice? And and then sloping, draining toward down towards the curb. Yes, that's important. Arthur, thanks for mentioning that. Like the whole yard slopes down, so water moves this way on the property. And most LA homes do kind of drain away from the house. That's pretty standard. Brittany says yes, they look healthy and thriving. Yeah, I would say these look like pretty healthy plants. I don't see a lot. I mean, obviously we're not up close. Lola, thank you for saying that. Pinch pruning, like these are young, these are still young plants. This would be something where I'd be like, okay, they're gonna need some pinch pruning. As we talked about, that's a really common maintenance activity for new plants. So to make them bush out a bit more and kind of fill out the space to be a bit more densely, densely branched. Let's see, Connie says, I'm curious about the irrigation due to the downslope. Yeah, so downslope, is there anything anyone's noticing like this thing? Anything in this zone they want to mention kind of along with the irrigation?
I think it could use a focal point, and it could use trees to shade the house to save energy. There's no trees there at all.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
Yeah, we don't also know which way this is facing. So if it were south facing, I might be like, what if they're going to put in like solar panels? And I don't want like a huge tree. But also if it's south facing, it's getting a lot of sun. So it's kind of like figuring that out with the, owner.
Where those two windows are, it seems like you could have a deciduous tree there.
Yeah, maybe that, yeah, for sure. So those are kind of like more design, like, you know, aesthetics. So you might ask them about that.
Also have that downspout, that chain.
Yes, thank you. Who mentioned that, Devin? Thank you for, yeah, what do you think about that? Or what do you?
A lot of water is going to be sitting right behind that rock there.
Thank you. Okay, yes. So this rain chain's a big clue. Like, okay, that, and then they have gutters. So water, that means all this roof runoff potentially, you'd have to see where they're divided, but maybe both of these roof sheds would go down this chain. So this is going to be a lot of water on the site. You can kind of see it here. Do you see this indentation? So yeah. I suspect this is actually an infiltration basin. It's been mulched. You don't have to put river rock there. It can just be an infiltration basin. And it really looks like this probably was a yard like that was, you know, qualified for the turf replacement program. So they just have infiltration basin, which is one of the requirements of the rebate program. And the rain chain goes into there. So that's great because that means at least there's what's it called? There's some kind of feature in the garden that is absorbing that water. Because if that was just a rain chain and it was flat, as Devin mentioned, like that's a lot of water. So if this didn't have a indentation here, that's kind of hard to see. I would be concerned that we would just have erosion coming down here. But there is an indentation. There's a nice big rock. So it'll probably overflow, but just so, you know, like it might be a slow overflow, but something to keep in mind. And also, like I said, if there's an infiltration basin, it's something to maintain. You know, you want to make sure that it's always functioning. So after a big heavy rain or something, make sure that like, you know, the water actually infiltrated here, or did it all flood out over, you know, in some other area, you know, making sure that it's actually functioning. Because the idea with the infiltration basin is it rains and then the water goes to the kind of lowest point and then slowly infiltrates in. So yeah, Arthur mentioned bioswale, perfect. Okay, yeah, so we are kind of talking about that first one, and you can see on the second picture, it has filled out quite a bit. These are all kind of the same. So here's this, looks like a St. Catherine's lace, and here it is there, bigger. And here's the rock. I think we're actually, we're taking a picture from like around here looking this way. So this would be that like ceanothus looks to be with the lights. And there's the rock in the background. It does look like kind of strange angle. And then all the yarrow would be somewhere off screen. The yarrow is these little guys. They would be off screen on the second photo. So you can see this is quite large now. What about what's going on here? Anyone have any?
Looks like they planted something.
Yeah, it's a new planting because it's definitely not here. It should be somewhere around here. And I definitely don't see that stake anywhere here. So that would be if a new planting in a mixed plant, in a more established, of course, it's only 2 years old, but what would we say about the watering regime for this guy then?
Definitely those newer plants are gonna have to get hand watered since they're new.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, thank you, Yoli. Yeah, for sure. Like that's a brand new plant. He's going to be a little bit like his roots are going to be smaller and not as developed as these other more developed plants. So yeah, definitely would have a hand watering situation here. What about this stake situation? It looks like it's like a Sphaeracea ambigua or something, like maybe that or like a Gambelia. I think it might be Sphaeracea, but it's hard to say.
Usually you don't want to plant that close to the hardscape because you're supposed to leave, I think, like, depending on if it's a small, medium, or large tree, you're supposed to leave like maybe 5 to 10 to 15 feet from your hardscape.
Good point. Yeah.
I don't know if it's gonna damage the sidewalk, over time. I mean, the driveway.
Yeah, I think it's a Sphaeracea, and if it's like a Lewis Hamilton, they don't get too huge, but that is a good point. And if it's a Gambelia also, I guess that could get creepy Carly-ish all over the driveway. I guess I'm kind of like bummed about the staking situation. It's not the ideal stake method. It might be just temporary to kind of hold it upright. It looks like it's kind of just loosely wrapped around a bit. But again, we've talked about, seems like it is loosely attached, or there's like 2 here, but I would try to do kind of, yeah, I'm not really sure what's going on, but I would be curious about it.
Maybe like 3 stakes.
Yeah, like 3 stakes, and then, try to wean the plant off of it. We don't want to have it. It doesn't seem like it's tightly up against it, so that's a good thing. We'll go to the next one. Sorry, I went back and forth, but this one on the left is newly installed 1 year later. What are we noticing here? What kind of?
Well, I like the tree. I think the tree becomes a focal point. Is that Palo Verde?
Yeah, the Parkinson. Yeah, exactly. There's a nice tree in both of the kind of like amoeba shaped or bean shaped things.
And you have the verticality. You have the small, medium, and then the tree.
Yeah. Ramon mentioned it gets frequent maintenance. Yes. So I think this is like me looking at this, and I think Ramon, you're speaking to that, which is like this looks pretty manicured. like pretty well kept. So I would ask about that. It looks good, but that seems like okay. They've got these like this DG, and they've got very clean. Like this barrier between the gravel or whatever that is, and these look very clean. So it's like that's where I would be like, okay, this person wants a manicured look, or make sure to like ask about that. Is that it looks like Yoli says it looks like a lot of work. Yeah. So for some people, this is like, whoa, high, crazy manicured, and for other people, it's like this is exactly what I want to look like. So definitely, I think that this look is an indicator of something that's pretty like high maintenance, in terms of upkeep like that. Good one, Lola. That's a great point. Weeds crawling in between the rocks. So the pavers that are kind of the border of the beds, especially if there was like Bermuda grass or something that used to live underneath all this. That's a very good point. That can be such a pain to clean up. What about like talking about stakes again? What do we talk about like with the stakes and how to do it? And this is a newly installed one, and that stake on the left, like, and the stake on the right. Any changes we're noticing? Yeah, Brittany says very.
A little bit. Yeah.
Sorry, say that again, Devin.
Just loosen them up, give it some space so the tree can kind of move.
Exactly, and Brittany said the same. She said very close to the trunk and hasn't moved at all. So that looks like that is way too tight. And also to keep it that tight a year later, you know, this plant, you know, loosening it up or putting two and having the kind of like, you know, one wrap on one and one wrap on the other side. So it has some more flow. So it can actually strengthen and you're not actually kind of hindering the, well, you're actually like weakening it in a way, you know, you want it to actually strengthen itself on its own. So it needs a little bit of motion. So yeah, oh, great point, Brittany. Yes, and Parkinsonia, she says they need it too. They can get heavy and flimsy if you don't do it properly. It's true. They can get like top heavy. And again, like I think I likened it to like a cast, you know, you know, your muscles just wither away if you can't use them. So you kind of want to have some flow. So that steak kind of bums me out. I would be like, oh, we got to change that. Any other kind of notes? Let's see, normally 2 growing seasons for staking, and I agree it's too tight. Yeah, it should be replaced with 2 stakes and cinch ties. Yes, perfect, David. Snap, if stake is moved, the trunk may be weak. Yeah, again, Cindy, I would say like if you move, you can keep the stake, but just do 2, then you know, you'll slowly let it kind of strengthen over time. I'm gonna move along since I could talk about this stuff all day long. Okay, so newly installed on the left, and then only 4 months later on the right. Anything we note here, like just from that difference even, or anything of note on this garden?
Is the spacing correct? Because maybe, I'm not sure what plants those are, but maybe there's too many. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. Like thinking about the spacing, I would say, I think it looks a bit tight, and these are only 4 months old and they're already kind of filling out the space quite a bit. And this is Verbena lilacina. There's a Dudleya in there. You can see it on this photo, and then the grass we can't even see. But this Dudley is already like wedged between these. It's probably going to get covered and smothered. This looks like the, like maybe the Malva lavatera, or like something like that. It's hard to
big, right?
Yeah, but exactly. So well, either way, like, you know, if we had a close up, I would say like that might be something that's getting big. And I do think these can get like, you know, 3 to 4, like 3 feet wide-ish, 3 to 4 feet. So, I mean, it's still got some ways to go. So I think it might get a bit crammed looking. So the spacing, good point. I think I would be kind of concerned about that. It looks fine up here. You know, that's what people kind of want to do. They like overplant it, but you know that there's going to be some pruning involved, or, you know, transplanting of plants. Anything else about like, you know, even what's around this? It's not just the plants themselves, but all of this is considered part of the garden, you know. Oh, Lola says, oh, wait, sorry. Purple plant may get too close to the walk. Yes. Oh, that's true. It could be kind of over. Once it actually grows out, it might be shedding a bunch of material and flowers. And then Lola said sweeping the DG back off the sidewalk. So over here, yeah, there's by the water box. It even looks like there's some kind of potential erosion that is going to happen. So that will be DG in the sidewalk, which is just, you know, something you have to do. William says drainage issues with the sloping DG. Yeah. So again, kind of going back to, and although Arso says DG looks loose, messy sidewalk. Yeah. So this looks like the DG is something that would require upkeep at minimum. You know what I mean? And then this is potentially erosion here. And so erosion, runoff, whatever, you know, it means that your DG is not going to be in the same place that you want it to be. Anything else that anyone notes about kind of like a missed opportunity?
The tree.
Netta says, doesn't look like a good runoff catchment garden because of the barrier. Yes, I feel the same way, Netta. Like this is a total missed opportunity. This barrier here actually means when the rain falls, it falls here on this landscape. And instead of being able to just go straight into the zone where all these plants are and these roots are that want water, it's just hitting a barrier and going down on the sidewalk. So just like kind of like a damn it moment for me. But yeah, so spacing, erosion, DG stuff, and yeah, the barrier is a bummer because I feel like it's just kind of an opportunity where you could have had water catchment. Okay, I think I have one more picture. Yeah. Okay. What about this one?
Yuck. No maintenance. And then there's no, the mulch has been all blown away, or like there's some mulch, but then it's all bare on the other spot.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. For
Yeah.
sure. There's definitely like a lack of mulch in parts. It's very patchy. Needs some like now you guys got a lot of colors. Need some deadheading. Yes, of course, back here you can see there's a bunch of potentially deadheadable salvias, it seems. Lack of design. Yeah, it seems like there's not a cohesion to it. It seems like, okay, there's a big thing here, some mess here. I don't know what's going on. Looks like some dying plants here, which potentially could be a problem. Looks like a manzanita and then a bunch of who knows. So lack of design, overwatering, erosion. Yeah, I wonder like what's happening with the watering, because this mulch is dry, but it's like clearly wet here. So something with like the irrigation system or situation is not watering thoroughly and evenly all over. That's for sure. Neglected, weeds, random crowding. Yes, yes, good way to be concise, Brittany. Yes, there's like weeds mixed in with the more intentional plants, and definitely it seems like there's some crowdedness up here, and then all of a sudden there's not. So it seems like it's a garden without a plan, you know. But definitely, I think first I would go for like what's happening with the watering situation, because that might be what's causing the weeds, might be what's causing the like potentially whatever's happening. Maybe this is dieback, I'm not sure. You know, it's really hard to say. There's like little dead patches throughout. And it seems like this is almost a hump. Like this is a hump here and this is lower. So yeah, Amelia, I kind of thought the same. It almost looks like kind of inconsistent hand watering. This is what it looks like when people just spray like full force with their hose at the water, at the landscape, because it tends to hit, like when you're just spraying without like a nozzle, like a shower nozzle on it, sometimes that wears away at the mulch and it just goes downhill, you know? I mean, that happens naturally with gravity also, but that might be like they're spraying at the plant and it gets it wet and it just kind of stops there and doesn't water everything evenly. So yeah, this is something that's kind of my first, like, well, we got to deal with that problem first. And then I would get to but of course it seems like, you know, based off of what you guys are saying, this is like needs a lot of work garden. Netta said not taking advantage of the grading in the landscape. Yeah, thank you. Again, like there seems to be natural swale in there. Yeah, exactly. This almost seems like here's like a lower point. Like this seems like I would plant along this almost, and then maybe put my desert or drainage needing plants on the top of this hill, because it seems like this is more of a hump. And then you can do your lower guys down here. It seems like it's a missed opportunity, Netta, where it's like you could just kind of plant along the low point, because that's where the water will collect naturally, and the plants will kind of take to it, and then maybe put your things that don't need as much water on the upper part.
I agree with the verticality Art is saying.
Oh, right. Missed opportunity to place a manzanita. Yes, of course. I mean, there is, I mean, who's just, I don't know if this is maybe going to be a taller one, but yeah, I like how you guys are like looking at the kind of 3D of it, or like the Z axis, you know, like how it looks very kind of like monotonous and short. So yeah, maybe a tree in there for sure. And it's a big space. So it seems like it could definitely handle a tree. Okay. It would be fun if we just did that for the whole rest of the class. I kind of wish maybe I'll make that suggestion. Okay, so I'm just going to go into a little bit about, this is just a quick kind of going from that checklist to, sorry, I'm going a little nuts. Going from that checklist to actually a plan. And yeah, essentially, so this PowerPoint talks about creating the map once you've had the checklist. But as we kind of talked, I actually prefer to have the map as my checklist, you know, all together. But in the end, it's the same concept, which is like you're taking all of that information that you gathered from the site assessment and you're putting it all together on the map and kind of mapping everything out. And then you're adding all the information. So we're going to go through each of these little things we have a slide for all these, but let's go through them quickly. Just like kind of the process of it, which is, again, you know, you have the Google map or whatever, kind of put all that, transfer all that information onto it and what elements and what condition they're in. And then you can kind of like really give yourself a good idea of what you're looking at. I already mentioned this, like having the elevation high, low points. Of course, have the boundaries of the property itself. That's important to know. That should be like all of your information together, pictures, everything, and then you kind of analyze it. You might have been able to do that all at once on site. Of course, it's not that hard. This is very much like teasing out exactly each step, but typically this is all happening at the same time. So you might have been able to figure that out at the site assessment itself, but analyzing it and going into like identifying whatever problems that you may have taken note of, which is you list your kind of key concerns. Wait, I'm sorry, I lost my. Yeah, so you probably have noticed, whatever issue, obviously we did that just now in the exercise, whatever, main concerns that came up, you can take note of and, put your little priorities or stars by. Of course, ask, the owner might share with you their main concerns. They might be different than what you're noting. And then start to figure out, is this like a pest problem, or is it a weed problem? Is it, is this something that is, is this like a pruning issue, like lack of pruning, or is this something that can be solved with some adequate pruning? Or is it like we saw in those examples where it's like, overplanted to where like maybe removing plants or transplanting them around might fix this? Soil mulch problem, maybe you're picking the wrong plant for the wrong spot. So maybe it's just a case of not having the right plant for the right place. So is it appropriate plants, and or is it just like irrigation? So again, you're just taking that to that checklist and making it make sense. Let's see. Oh, of course, you definitely want to add utility connections. So where does the irrigation system actually tap into the water supply? You should know where that is, usually there's some kind of water box, so it's kind of clear where the water comes in. And if their irrigation system was set up correctly, there will be a shutoff valve. That means that there's a shutoff valve for the irrigation system, so that if like a pipe breaks or something, you don't have to shut off the water to the whole property to fix it. You know what I mean? You just shut off the shutoff valve for the garden or for the irrigation system, and then you can fix it. So, I mean, typically people have these. If they don't, I would really encourage you to, or like either install one or encourage them to have one, because it's, just so much easier. That being said though, knowing where utilities are, so water, pipes or electricity, all those things are important, and you can contact 811 or Dig Alert to find out where they are if you don't know. This is a great free service if you guys don't know what it is. You can just call, you put in a work order for an address, and within 72 hours, they come out and they mark the utilities at the site, and you indicate where you're going to be working. So you can just like put a big like chalk circle in the front yard or something, and they'll just like mark where the different utilities are. And this is important, not just for like water and whatnot, but you don't want to be planting like enormous trees right where maybe like a pipe is that's like 18 inches down, or like electric is, or something like that. So this is a super helpful service. I don't know if I mentioned it's free, but it's free. So doing this and knowing, or at least knowing where the utilities are before you, especially on an install, because you'll be doing a bunch of digging, might be different if it's a garden that's already installed and maintained, or it just needs maintenance. Okay, and then lastly, or almost lastly, you're just going to set your priorities with the owner and make sure that you figure out what you should have already done this when you talk to them. You'll know what more or less what's important to them based off of what you've seen in the garden. You kind of agree to what, what makes sense, what they, you kind of create your list of priorities that you think is going to be the plan of attack for the garden. If it's like a maintenance situation or an install situation, it's going to be different clearly. But giving your kind of list of priorities so that everybody's on the same page about what you're actually offering services for. That way your estimate is accurate, and you're not like trying to include things that they had no idea that, or had no desire for. So you should have some kind of like, what they've agreed to, put this thing in writing, and then just documenting that all back to the owner. So you've kind of come up with some priorities and a plan, and I document that all in like a nice kind of formalized document. Maybe it's your map thing, but a little bit fancied up. and your checklist and kind of the things that you saw, what you guys agreed you were going to, your assessment and for the site and the priorities you guys agreed to as being for the garden plan. And any photos, you can also include those, any before photos. And then that's kind of your plan. And you just, if it's a maintenance gig, you're updating that annually. You know what I mean? You just review your plan with them on a regular, just on a yearly basis, and just communicate with the client about how you see their garden going. And, take advantage of, at least once a year to, if they need new plants, to talk about that before the rainy season so that you can actually get those plants in and, before the rains come, if we ever have rain again. Okay, so let's see. I think we're at 6. Oh, perfect. 6:01. Let's do a little break, and we'll come back, talk about troubleshooting, and then I'll just go over a cost analysis kind of Excel sheets that we have. But so 6:06, let's meet back here. Break.
I have a non-related question, or maybe it's related.
Okay.
Is there a book about how Native people took care of the national park areas, like Yosemite and like the Muirwood?
I don't know about a specific one for national parks, but there's a really good one called Tending the Wild. That's about the California, like the indigenous folks of California, and how they were actually managing all of California via, like either fire escaping and or different, like, utilizing fire and how they actually were managing that system. And it wasn't just like a fluke. So that's a really great one, but I don't know about, maybe anyone in the chat that knows a good one about specifically the national parks. I'm sure there's got to be some.
Yeah, because I was looking at the map that we were provided.
Oh, the native land.
And and like Yosemite and Sequoia, I think, and then the Muirwoods and the Bay, those were all the Miwok people.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering, like, those lands are so beautiful. Maybe they had like special knowledge. I don't know.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but like if it's saved somewhere, like.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I know that I'm more familiar with the California ones just because, California native plants, but for sure there's got to be a good one for those areas. In fact, I would just, ask about, maybe if it's a particular tribe, like, Miwok or something, and asking about that, about books on their kind of cultural practices and, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Arthur, for putting that in there. Tending the Wild there is a really great one. I mean, I'd start there. Tending the Wild is really, I haven't even finished it because it's just so dense and it has so many interesting things, even just about like how they would manage plants for example, for like cultivating the plants so that they can have the like juncus for weaving their baskets, or like creating landscapes so that it would actually invite more like deer into the site so they could actually hunt them at close range. So it's like, it really kind of breaks people's assumption of like, oh, indigenous people just like kind of randomly found this on accident and like there was all this wildlife and they just kind of were in this like paradise, when in reality they were very much managing it and like cultivating it. So I'm sure there's got to be books on the Yosemite area too.
I mean, if you just go to the jungle, it's messy, but like these parks are parks.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And there's an indigenous people for every region, and they've lived in those areas for so long. They have to have a knowledge about it and the plants and stuff. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for the class.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. Anyone else that has any books that they want to recommend in the chat? We should totally, it's a great opportunity to share books. I mean, I'm trying to think. I have also, I sometimes like, I don't have one on Yosemite areas, but I know I have like a Kumeyaay ethnobotany book, and there's like a Chumash ethnobotany. So a lot of times you could just look like Miwok ethnobotany, and that might give you an idea about, you know, different, like how the native people used plants for different things. Let's see, 606, okay. All right, so back to class. I guess I'll just mention this quickly. This calendar, I think we mentioned it for one of the alternative homeworks, but in case you guys didn't mention or didn't see it, on page 139, there's a kind of monthly maintenance guide. And I think this is helpful, especially if you're beginning and you don't like have that kind of rhythm of like, when do I do these things? So it's a nice, helpful little thing about that. Obviously, it's helpful for having the pruning. You know, it says like irrigation, you do it like, you know, run your valves, you know, every 4 times a year or something. So it's just kind of a good template, but I just wanted to bring it up in case anyone, some of the pruning things aren't necessarily accurate to every single plant, because it's, you know, they've just generalized it into these generic categories. But, you know, obviously, as we talked in the pruning class, not everything, it kind of depends, you know, it depends on what is your purpose behind the pruning, and pest stuff too. I wouldn't, you know, this isn't like a thing I would follow religiously, but okay. So quickly into troubleshooting. Basically, so, you know, they're always going to have problems. The main problems that are reported by kind of native plant professionals in California are the following. So it's like overplanting, pruning because of overplanting, ants, gophers, weeds, and then the availability of plants in actual nurseries. I would say, I mean, I would add, I don't know why it's not on here, but I guess they just didn't survey me, but definitely like watering new plants, I think, is an issue, or under or overwatering. You know, a lot of times people with a new plant either underwater because they're like, oh, it's a native plant, it doesn't need any water, or they overwater it because they're just overeager. So yeah, overplanting is good for nursery business for sure. So yeah, I think these will be issues that you come up with. So having a plan for them is important, you know, so make sure you're like familiar with what to do with these things, you know. If overplanting is such a big issue, you know, that should be something that kind of comes to mind when you're looking at a garden for the first time. Like, is the spacing appropriate? You know, because clearly it's an issue. And I know in past classes that that is what people said happened a lot, which is like they definitely just put too many plants and they just became like, you know, big mess. Ants, we've talked about that in the pest class, you know, what to do. I would definitely stay on top of the scale or aphids, you know, their kind of farmed products. Stay on top of those to kind of so the ants don't get like a foothold. And gophers, like we talked about that, definitely an ish. Weeds, and I can't emphasize it enough to stay on top of weeds early. And not much I can do personally about the availability of plants in local nurseries. So that being said, though, those are kind of problems that we know exist, but of course there's always going to be something that unexpectedly or that you just don't have experience with, you know what I mean? That's inevitable, that's going to happen, that's something that you just didn't anticipate, or a problem you've never had before. And that's when you want to make sure you have all your resources, you know, like your student handbook is such a great resource, especially that maintenance guide that we went over last class, but also all the other resources we've talked about, CalScape, the CNPS, California Native Plant Society website, Theodore Payne Foundation's website, any kind, even just going to those your like local California Native Plant Society chapter meeting, or if they have a forum or something, those are full of tons of information and eager people that want to help. So if you have access to some, you know, horticultural expert, great too, but, you know, have your resources ready for, you know, when the unexpected happens, which could just be a problem you didn't anticipate. And this is just it's such a basic troubleshooting guide that it's like, it's basically for any issue in life, you know, which is just understand the problem first, make a plan, execute that plan, and then see if that problem actually, gets resolved. And when you're trying to understand the problem, just make sure, if you're having an issue you've never had before, you want to consider if this is an issue that's kind of like unique to native plants, especially if you're not exclusively gardening with native plants. Is this something that is a specific issue to them? Like, is this a summer deciduous plant? We don't typically deal with summer deciduous plants with exotic plants. You know what I mean? So is this something that's specific to natives, or like, or even the issue of watering and then slowly tapering off to get until plants are established? That's not something you have to do with conventional kind of plants you can buy from Home Depot. You just plug them in and water them the day you install it as you will in the future. So yeah, finding out, like, is this like a native plant thing? Do you have some situation that's worked with other plants that's kind of similar? Maybe that can help. Do you just not know the plant? You know what I mean? Maybe you just need to get more information about that plant. Maybe you have to talk to someone about like this plant specifically. But I've mentioned this, but I just definitely I would always go to, when you're trying to figure out the problem, like think about the water use thing, like, think about that first, because that can be such a compounding problem on other things like overwatering or underwatering or just not irrigating appropriately, that I would kind of always put that as your first kind of concern. So like, think about the problem through the watering like glasses or something, you know what I mean? Like, make sure to think of it through that first, because it can lead to failure in so many instances or create pests and stuff. So kind of put that as your first kind of consideration. And then of course that replanting thing too, like if you have mixed plants, that's gonna, mixed aged plants, so that you can kind of consider maybe you have to treat this plant differently because it's a different age. And that's a big one with native plants. Okay, so yeah, making the plan. Remember that when we talk, so you want to kind of like make a list or kind of describe the issue, especially, if you're like we saw with the diagnostic tool, you want to list it, figure it out pretty methodically, go through it pretty methodically in terms of what the issue is. And that's like, remember we talked about it with the IPM, which is like start with the whole plant, then go to the main stem and branches, then the leaves, the fruit, or the flowers and the fruit. So just be very thorough about it, and come up with a list of issues and potential solutions based off of your diagnostic tool or all the resources that you've kind of consulted, and then devise some kind of plan. If that's like, okay, the IPM website says that I need to just try the soapy water on the aphids, try that first, and just stick with a plan, make one plan and start there. And then but also, I guess I should have mentioned too, you can also be looking for patterns, not just like making your list of like, I see all these things like the diagnostic tool. Also try to like hone your pattern identifying part of your brain, which is like, is this something that happens? Like, is this pattern something that happens like temporal? Like, is the pattern temporal or spatial? Like, do I always see it at this time of the year? Do I always see it in this side of the yard? Do I always or maybe whenever I plant these three plants together, I don't have this issue, something like, just start to hone the pattern identification part of your brain. And in addition to being very thorough when you're listing kind of what the issue could be. And then of course, actually do your plan. So like, okay, I'm going to actually apply this mild soapy water to the aphids. And you're actually gonna have to go to the site to do that. But I think that I can't stress it enough. I would always work your plan, but always start with, if you have like multiple issues or you're confused about what's happening, start with the addressing the irrigation issue first. Always address the irrigation issue first if there is one, and then do whatever pest issue, and then third do like replanting. So if you were to replant first, and you didn't address any irrigation issue first, you're just going to keep replanting plants into a situation or that they aren't thriving in. Maybe the overwatering or the irrigation system is somehow compounding the pest issue. So yeah, always kind of execute your plan, but prioritize irrigation first, then pest, and then replanting things that are, or replacing plants. Okay, and then yeah, lastly, see if the problem's solved. That's kind of no brainer. Did it solve in the time frame that you expected? You know, you got to have some kind of expectations for when to expect changes, but clearly in especially with integrated pest management, garden problems don't go like they don't solve overnight. This is all about like the least invasive, the least toxic methods. So your solutions are you have to be patient with, and don't expect changes so immediately. And it's just, you know, important to give some patience to it, to actually see if your plan works. And if it doesn't, you just start back over. You know what I mean? You do the process of elimination essentially. So now you go back to the drawing board if it didn't work. And now you know, okay, this solution of soapy water doesn't work. And you just move down the line of, you know, implementing new plans. Okay, so I'll just do I'm going to go to a Excel sheet I have. We're going to do a quick review of like a Excel sheet that this is very simple because it's hard to really address every situation that someone might have as a landscape professional, since folks might be working on really large scales or really small scales. This is just kind of a very generic and easy way to look at it. You can see here on the bottom, I have these 4 tabs. This is the kind of table of contents. We're gonna like compare a turf garden versus a native garden in terms of kind of how you might approach the different hours, or the pricing, calculating the costs for maintaining a garden like that. And then we'll talk about like the different timing for each task, because that will help you calculate how many hours you need. And then I can't really remember what that one is. So anyway, so here I'll toggle between the 2 of these. You can see it's green when I'm on it. Here's turf garden. And this is just an example of a yard that, and this is just kind of like just a kind of simple way to calculate your costs for a site. And here you can see the project is, it's made up of front and side gardens and a back garden. And this one is turf. Again, we're just using a turf example. So the conventional kind of garden. You can see it's turf and bedding plants, and it has the square footage. So about 1,200 square feet for front and side. Back garden is turf, slope, and bedding plants. That comes out to 1,300. So 2,500 square feet for the area that wants to have a maintenance on it. And basically, you know, you just are going to assess, okay, what is the hours I need to spend to maintain this amount of square footage. And that, you know, you can calculate based off of your own experience. And then in the next tab, I'll show you kind of how you can do it if you're not familiar with how long things take. Here you can see this is hours per month per area. And you can see this little comment here. It says visiting every week. So this client, what did I do here? I want to move over. Oh yeah, so this client is visiting every week. So these are weekly visits. And again, this is a turf garden. So yeah, that makes sense. You typically, you know, visit them weekly, you know, mow them, do the whatever trimming and hedging, and it's a pretty quick thing. But this has been divvied up, so hours per month. So you can see it's 4 hours for just this turf section. So that means 1 hour each visit for that turf section. That should make sense because it's like, you know, 4 weeks in a month. So in total, each of these get delineated into how many hours per month for each section, and then you have the total. So we're saying 16 hours per month for the whole garden, which means if you go weekly, that means it's 4 times a month. So that means 4 hours per month. So we're talking about a visit that's 4 hours long, which, you know, a lot of them are much shorter than that, but, you know, 4 hours long, 4 times a month. So 16 hours. So clearly you just have to multiply your hours by your rate. And that's what your total cost per month would be in terms of like how much you're charging this person. Here you can see down below, we just use this rate of $40 an hour for this maintenance worker. Clearly it's not about the numbers, you know, whatever your maintenance worker goes for, that's, you know, you would implement that. This is just for the example's sake. And 16 times 40, 640. So we got $640 per month to upkeep this place. And then the cost per visit is just this cost per month divided by 4 visits, because there's only, you know, they're visiting weekly. So it's $160 you charge a week. So that, and then you can see, you just multiply this cost per month times 12 months, you get the total for the year. And then even here, you can do the annual cost per square foot, which is like essentially taking this annual cost and dividing it by the total square footage. And that's helpful in terms of like, I guess, especially if you want to be kind of, if this is your goal and you normally kind of charge about $3 per square foot, it's a good for like kind of back of the napkin calculations. If you're looking at a new site and you're like, okay, this is 3,000 square feet and I charge $3 a square foot. Okay, it's like going to be this much, $9,000 or something. Okay, so pay attention, I guess, to this column and this one mostly. So when we go to Native Garden, it's the same client. Essentially, you can see I'm just toggling back and forth. The square footage changes a little bit. The other one is 22,500. This is 2,300 because somewhere here in the 200, this is native plants and slope, same as before, but we lost the bedding plants. So maybe that turned into a pathway or something. So we only have 2,300 square feet, but still pretty similar. And still you do the same thing, hours per month. And here it's 8 hours for this 1,200 square feet. So basically the same size or same square footage for the front and side yard. But the hours are, the hours are more, but also you are visiting twice a month. So maybe this is a newly installed garden, it's been transitioned, and now you're visiting less frequently, but you're spending more time at each visit. So you can see that that would mean it's 4 hours each visit because you're only going twice a month. So that means you're 4 hours just to tend this 1,200 square feet per visit. So again, tally up all these things and it actually comes up to the same amount of hours per month as the other one, but clearly you're visiting less often and the cost would be the same if we have the same worker. I mean, clearly this just depends. If your maintenance worker for native plants is more expensive than your maintenance worker for turf landscapes, then that would have a change in the cost, clearly. But you can see the main difference here is the cost per visit, because clearly this cost is divided by 2 as opposed to divided by 4, because now you're just going twice a month as opposed to weekly. So you're actually able to charge more per visit, potentially, you know what I mean? And obviously it's just that you have more hours spent, but clearly if you're charging more for like a more specialized skill, then that would also kind of warrant the higher price. And in this example, the annual cost is the same, but you're doing, half as many visits. And the cost per square foot went up a little bit because of we're dividing it by a smaller number because of the square footage that went down. So anyway, that's just kind of like, very general, kind of generic way to calculate tasks. But like, how do you calculate how many hours? That's going to depend on your checklist and your site assessment. Like when you looked at the garden and you said, oh, wow, this is a healthy garden, it doesn't need much. That's going to determine how many hours you dictate for your visits. And here is a task timings kind of table. This is going to help you determine the hours that you need to do the actual maintenance tasks, the different ones. And here it's kind of divided. You can change. You can actually do it by year. It says, this is just an example because your maintenance tasks can kind of change over the years. Over the years they can change. So you could like literally figure it out for each year what the tasks would be based and customize based off of activities per garden. So here, like we have a bunch of different tasks or like activities you need to do in the garden and times associated with them. So you can really just kind of add them up and customize your kind of calculation to whatever garden you're working with. So here, for example, is like deadhead of salvia, a Cleveland sage by hand. We're saying this is hours. I guess it's not said anywhere, but this is in hours. So we're saying that takes a half hour. Again, this is going to be, the numbers aren't super important. This is going to be based off of your crew or your time it takes to do stuff. So this is just an example. But if it's, a deadheading a salvia Cleveland sage by hand takes a half hour and it's a garden of like 10 Cleveland sages, then you just multiply that by, a half hour by 10. So it's like 5 hours to deadhead, So there's that, assigning a task time for each time it takes to do each task. And you can do that for all the different activities, or just kind of lump them together. There's weeding per 100 square foot. So if you have a couple hundred square feet, multiply this quarter of an hour by the couple hundred square feet. And then you know how much you need to do for each activity. Sweeping and cleaning up, definitely have that in there. You always have that. You can put this in, twice a year or 4 times a year to do a irrigation check. If you're watering, mulch application, that's a good one to know. Like, how long does it take for you to actually apply, 100 square feet of mulch? So you could accurately kind of quote someone, because you'll be like, oh yeah, that takes me this much time, and I know how much I pay my guy, and so this is the cost. And yeah, there's all these different activities. You can see prune by hand, medium. Oh, you can, instead of doing, oh, that was deadheading, just kidding. But yeah, prune by hand, a medium-sized shrub per 10 plants. That's a great little number to have. Like, this says 1.5 hours. But again, yeah, this definitely is dependent on your, on your situation. And maybe it's just helpful to like get in the beginning so you can kind of like quote something more or less. And then over time, you'll be able to just quote it very easily without having to do all this extra stuff. I think know how long it takes you to plant a 1 gallon, because that is really helpful, especially with installs. Here we're saying it takes like, 15 minutes, which is like dig the hole. That's you digging the hole. That's you filling the hole with water, letting it drain, actually planting the 1 gallon in there and then watering it. How long does that fully take for one plant? Because if you're doing an install and, you have 100 plants to install and you're like 100 times 0.25, that's 25 hours, so that's like a, full day, 3 days of work, or you need to have more people, something like that. So make sure you, wait, did I do that math right? 25 times 100, yeah, 25 hours. Anyway, so this, I think, is just a way to, you just sum them up, your different activities, and then you have those hours for this chart here, how to calculate the hours per month. Yeah, Milton made a good point. Like, these are just, this is the kind of the point, this is the thing with like calculating costs, is it's always like, you kind of have to do an average. That's kind of how it is with calculating costs. You're never going to get like the exact number. And of course, maybe it takes 15 minutes on one plant and 12 on another and 8 on another, but find an average, because it's not going to be the same every time. But just so you can calculate stuff. I can't remember. Oh, right. This is just an example bid for actually like a turf contract, like a turf proposal for like a, I think this is like a golf course or something, because it's huge square footage. I can't remember if it's on here somewhere. I thought it was, or it's just either way, the point of this is not really, it's just mostly to, I think, see how contract bids are created for turf so that you can kind of replicate it in a way, because so many people have the misconception that native plants don't have any maintenance at all. So if you show up and are like, yeah, I'm going to charge you for maintaining them, people are like, wait, I thought they're low maintenance, they're no maintenance, so you have to kind of spell out what exactly it is you're doing. So you can see here, it has like aeration and fertilization, and it says what things they're fertilizing, weed control, all these things. You could do the same, and you basically use your tasks that you listed here and inform them of what you're doing. So especially in the mature garden, you probably replace this fertilization with pruning. So pruning medium-sized shrub, pruning this many times a year, blah, 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 your ground covers, or, your bunch grasses, put it all in writing so people really understand what it is you're doing. Because let's see. Yeah, because it's, it's just, this is what people are used to. And so having something similar to kind of explain your work and what your maintenance includes, I think it's just kind of easier. Aeration, Milton, is typically with turf. You have to they have these things that kind of like add air to the soil, because it's just like part of turf upkeep, usually like golf courses and stuff. Sometimes you'll see little plugs that come out when I grew up in the desert where there's a lot of golf courses, so I remember that as a kid. But yeah, aeration is a common thing you need with big, large turf zones. If you're upkeeping regular turf, that's like nice turf, not someone's kind of like forgotten one. Okay, where am I at? 6:30. Okay, I think I'm gonna try to get through this quickly so I can make time for surveys and stuff. Oh yeah, these are just odds and ends. Inventory, super helpful to have a plant inventory for a garden or a site you're maintaining. It's not absolutely, I think some people are like, I don't need that, but it's really helpful to have. not just for clients, depending on the client, but, they might not be familiar with plants. So you having an inventory of their plants is helpful, or, for labeling them if somebody's interested in that, but also more for you so that if there's any future replacements, especially because there's so many different native plants, but there's also a lot of different varieties. So it's like, if you just put epilobium, there's 60, 70 different epilobiums you could possibly replace it with. And if you want that same one, or you don't want the white yarrow, you want the paprika colored one, you got to kind of have an inventory of it. So I recommend that if it makes sense for your I'm not on present mode. That's why I was like, how come I can't this is just an example of an Excel spreadsheet of kind of keeping inventory. You could link this to a map, if you have a map, but essentially, this is pretty standard. I think anyone could do this in Excel, just like you have the location, maybe the hydro zone, irrigation zone that it's in, common name, scientific name. Always kind of put the date you planted it, because you might have ones that are planted at different times. You could put where you bought it, maybe, especially if you're noticing quality differences, maybe ones from a different nursery you don't have success with. And sometimes I like to use a code. If you're going to use a code, maybe on the label or something. I mean, you don't always need it. Maybe you have it on your map, you have it labeled HA1, and that would be Heteromeles artibudifolia 2021. So it's it tells you when it was planted, and it's easy on your map, and you can just kind of look at it quickly, and you might have that just with you instead of having to pull up a whole Excel spreadsheet. And whatever comments, you know what I mean? This is I think Microsoft Access, and this is just a kind of way to I'm gonna go to a way to kind of have an inventory record. I think this one's helpful because it's you have a photo of the plant itself and maybe what it's supposed to look like. And this one similarly has when it was acquired, where they get it from, the name and whatnot. And then here, I think this is helpful, especially if you have many clients and you're trying to keep track of all of them. You can see it was acquired in 2013. And in 2018, the note says, very scraggly looking. It sends up shoots, but is so messy and grim looking, has never flowered. And then the photo, is pretty grim. And so something that's been in the ground for 5 years is beyond that establishment phase. So it's really not thriving. It doesn't look like it's growing much. And the note says about it that it's messy and never flowered. So that's where I would be ooh, maybe we should transplant this guy to another spot, or consider, putting something else here. So that's why inventories can be helpful. Arthur, I think this is the Access database. Is it available somewhere? I think you know what? It's funny because I remember this last time. I've never really used this one. This was actually offered. Tim showed this one, and I think you have to just have Microsoft Office or whatever to do it. But maybe anyone who uses Microsoft can share with us how you where you have access to this. It's in the Microsoft suite. Yeah. Okay, there you go.
Hey, Claire. Yeah, I've designed databases before using Access,
perfect.
and I'm I recognize that.
Oh,
but
great.
It would save me having to do it from scratch. Yeah, That's great though.
Yeah, I feel I would personally add, I really like the idea of having photos to it and being able to upkeep your notes on it. Maybe you have an annual check-in. It's just about each person and how you kind of organize yourself, I think.
Yeah, I love it. How about the spreadsheets as well? Are those available somewhere? Or I thought
Excel
those were very well.
spreadsheet?
Yes.
No, this one here, you mean? I just made this one in Excel.
No, actually the forms, if you go back a couple of more, where you actually have everything broken
these
down.
ones. Oh yeah, the ones, sorry, it's not on my PowerPoint. It was, I went to, it's on Excel, and I just went to Google.
It's where you broke everything down into units and costs.
Yeah.
And time.
I think, I believe, because those were shared with me by Theodore Payne, so we could just access them. But I believe we can share them. Maybe we can send them out with the homeworks, or with when you get the recording emails and stuff. But yeah, so that you kind of have access to them too. Good point. I'll write that down so I can.
Yeah. Thanks, Claire.
Before I forget. Okay. Okay, so lastly, we're kind of wrapping up here, right? Yes. So signs of success, kind of metrics. This one's how do you, I mean, this is so almost generic, I think, because it really depends on what kind of work you're in, if you're in landscaping or install, or depends on that. But, getting to having, really having some kind of metric for what determines success in the garden. And that's something you should usually be able to establish by communicating with the owner about what to expect, you know what I mean? And if we kind of understood their goals during the kind of site assessment period, you should be able to get to that. But also you can kind of, it's always opportunity to educate clients about what other metrics are used for success, not just like that it grew in 6 months, like in 6 months I saw new growth. It could be like, you have seasonal color all year long, or you have more wildlife. Like, have you noticed more lizards and birds in your or hummingbirds or something like that? So giving them those tools to understand their garden, especially with someone who's new to natives, because typically you're not going to have a lot of clients that are like fans of natives that have them already, because they probably have the garden already. So you're probably getting newbies who don't necessarily know what to look for. So helping them understand what is considered kind of like a successful garden, maybe giving them an idea of like what success, like survival rate they should expect. Typically you should have like, maybe 5 to 10% loss, maybe, it depends, in your experience, what you get, but it's like, you shouldn't have like 50% loss in that first year, so helping them understand what to expect is helpful, and helps them recognize like, oh, it's working, it's alive, here's my garden, they can kind of take some ownership over it. So in alignment with that, you definitely want to always be communicating with the owners or clients and managing their expectations appropriately. I mean, I take every opportunity I can to educate, because early on I learned that like just saying something once isn't enough. You know what I mean? You think like, well, I mentioned that, but people don't always listen to everything, and you can always have multiple touches on the same topic so that you really drill it in. And again, education is about like multiple opportunities to explain the same thing, so it solidifies somehow in someone's brain. So definitely things that I would consider communicating especially with a new install garden, is the time it takes for plants to reach maturity. Make that really clear, like even put that in your contract or whatever, just like a note. Because again, if someone is used to a more conventional garden, they're used to getting results and it looking like it's established in 2 months. When in reality, we saw some of those photos that I shared earlier in the, kind of the interactive part, that like in 4 months, they're not full size yet. And again, we've talked like, it takes 1 to 3 years to establishment, and that might, that's going to, of course, affect their watering needs, because they take time to establish. So definitely like really try to hammer that home, really try to explain that, because folks, I know early on when I did installs, I didn't say it enough, and people would be like, wow, it's just so empty. There's so much mulch, because it's like the plants are just so small. So you really have to, unless they're willing to pay more for like a bigger size plant, you have to be clear about what they should be expecting when you recently installed something. And then of course, lastly, like low maintenance does not mean no maintenance. Yeah, definitely. Because I hear people all the time be like, oh yeah, I want a native garden because it's no maintenance and no water. It's like, that's not the case, especially when it's newly installed. So definitely consider saying all those things. Okay, lastly, opportunities for growth, theater paint, these I think are kind of no-brainers, but you can always kind of continue your education. Obviously, this is kind of helped through Theodore Payne. This program was put on through Theodore Payne Foundation, but also California Native Plant Society. And they, there's local chapters all over California, and they have seminars and meetups and forums where they talk, and and like garden plant sales and things. So kind of reaching out to those different groups to kind of, if you want to learn more and continue your education, but also like inform your clients and be better informed for your clients, I really recommend those. And even especially California Native Plant Society chapters, they are super pumped about hearing different folks that have experience maintaining gardens share their experience, because they're, these are native plant fans. So they want to know like, oh, you had this issue or that issue, and they can be a real resource of knowledge, but also a community that wants to interact with landscapers. And also like, obviously you could get business through those too. Not to be like all like money grubby capitalist all of a sudden, but it's a great way to, obviously resource, what's it called? Losing my train of thought.
Networking.
Network. Yes. Thank you. Is that what you said? I think I heard that.
Yeah,
That's what I wanted to say. Yeah. So yeah, definitely trying to reach out for those and looking out for any, obviously Theodore Payne has lots of different workshops and stuff. This is just repeat slides from the first class, which is the remember your certificate. You can use the logo and say that you're certified in any of your social media or publications, whatever. You can say that you mention your certification status, and you'll have your certificate. You can show it to people. I mean, these are all, we've talked about these already. You'll get them tomorrow or get them in the mail. The decals, I guess. And oh yeah, and we said this is the first class, but for those of you guys who missed it, they can't list you like California Native Plant Society, Theodore Payne, LADWP. They can't list you on their websites, but anyone can contact Theodore Payne and find out your kind of certification status if that is something you need. And clearly there's so many resources that have been offered. But that being said, I believe that's the last slide. Yes. So that's the end of our class. I'm so